In part 1, Zoe found her mother's photo in a billionaire's wallet and then learned the devastating truth. He was her father. Now, in part 2, the secret is no longer hidden, but the fight for her mother's dignity is just beginning. When the truth threatens a powerful family's legacy, Zoe must decide what kind of daughter she wants to be and what kind of woman she refuses to become. Stay with us to witness how one photo shattered a legacy and rebuilt another. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Zoe hadn't spoken to Richard Lawson in over a month. After their confrontation, she'd walked away carrying a truth too heavy to fully process. She wore her mother's pendant every day now. Sometimes it gave her strength, sometimes it pressed on her like a weight, but it never let her forget. Then one morning, a thick ivory envelope showed up at her door. Her name was embossed in gold on the front. She almost threw it away on instinct. Anything that elegant usually came with strings. But when she opened it, her entire body went still. Private memorial service for Evelyn Carter, it read. Hosted by the Lawson Family Foundation. A second card enclosed beneath it added even more weight. An official announcement of the Evelyn Carter Foundation, focused on healthcare access, education, and support for single Black mothers. And beneath that, Richard's signature. Zoe's heart twisted. She hadn't been asked, not consulted, not even informed. The woman who had raised her alone, who had died without so much as a front-page obituary, was now being honored by the very man who had abandoned her. And he was doing it with money, with headlines, with power. All the things Evelyn had never needed to prove her worth. All the things Evelyn never had. It felt wrong. Like history was being repackaged, polished to fit the narrative of a billionaire who had the luxury of grief on his terms. And yet, something about it held her still. This wasn't just about Richard. This was about her mother's name being said out loud, possibly for the first time in a room full of people who never even knew her. Zoe folded the invitation carefully and set it down. She didn't owe him anything, but she owed it to her mother to be there, not to accept what was being done, but to witness it, and if needed, to reclaim it. She would go, because Evelyn deserved to be remembered the right way, and if Richard thought he could control that too, he was about to find out who Zoe Carter really was. Zoe stepped into the Lawson Estate ballroom and immediately felt it, the weight of wealth in every corner. Crystal chandeliers, gold trim, polished marble. It was the kind of place her mother never would have walked into, and certainly not without someone whispering behind her back. But here, Evelyn's face was everywhere. Large photographs framed in silver stood on easels throughout the room. One showed her smiling at the free clinic where she'd worked for decades. Another showed her with a toddler in her lap, beaming. The caption read, "A life of service, a heart without limits." Zoe swallowed hard. That photo used to sit in a dusty frame on their kitchen shelf. Strangers were walking around sipping champagne, nodding politely at her mother's memory. People who had never met Evelyn. People who had never seen her come home bone-tired after a night shift, or who'd watched her patch up a child's scraped knee like it was sacred. It was beautiful, and it was wrong. Zoe drifted through the room quietly, absorbing it all. She wasn't here to cause a scene, but every part of her bristled at how curated it felt, as if Evelyn's legacy had been polished up to fit inside this world of glass and money, the same world that had pushed her out decades ago. A woman in a sleek black dress approached Zoe and smiled warmly. "You must be Zoe," she said. "Your mother was extraordinary. Richard told us so much about her." Zoe nodded stiffly. "Did he tell you why she died with nothing?" The woman's smile faltered. She murmured something polite and walked away. Zoe turned back to the photos. Her throat was tight, her fists clenched. They were honoring her mother, yes, but who was controlling the story? Then, from across the room, she saw him, Richard, standing by the fireplace, watching her. She held his gaze for a moment, then turned and walked toward him, not with affection, not with forgiveness, but with every intention of making her voice heard. Zoe stood just a few feet away from Richard, her arms crossed as she studied the man who had claimed to love her mother, but had left her behind. His suit was immaculate, the room warm with curated sympathy and soft piano music, but none of it dulled the sharp edge in her chest. "You did all of this," she said, her voice quiet but cold. Richard gave a slow nod, and I wanted people to know who she was, what she gave to the world. Zoe didn't flinch. She gave everything she had, and she died without recognition, without help, and without you. Now, suddenly, she's your legacy? I didn't mean. She cut him off before he could finish. Well, she's not your redemption project. The words landed like a stone between them. Richard's expression changed, guilt, shame. Something else flickering behind his eyes. You don't get to make peace with her memory just because you have the money now to rewrite the ending. You weren't there. You don't get to clean it up. He looked down for a moment, then back at her. You're right, he said, quieter now. Don't deserve to speak for her. That's why I'm asking you to. The foundation, it should be yours to lead, if you're willing. Zoe stared at him, uncertain. This was not what she had come expecting. She had walked into this room ready to confront a man who had erased her mother from his life. And instead, he was offering her the one thing Evelyn never had: control over her own legacy. She turned to the nearest photograph of her mother, Evelyn, caught mid-laugh in a candid clinic moment, her hand gently holding a child's shoulder. It was Evelyn, as she had always known her, tired, kind, and powerful in ways no one could measure with money. When Zoe looked back at Richard, her voice was firm. I'll lead it, but not for you, for her. Richard nodded once, his jaw tense but accepting. That's all I hoped for. There were no tears, no reconciliation, just a moment of clarity between two people linked by someone they had both lost, and a legacy too important to leave in the wrong hands. For a few days after the memorial, Zoe stayed quiet. She needed space to breathe, to think, to grieve again in her own way. But the world didn't wait. It started with a headline on a finance blog. Billionaire Richard Lawson reveals secret daughter, names her head of new foundation. Then came the ripple. Social media lit up. Photos of Zoe at the gala spread across timelines. Every comment carried either wide-eyed curiosity or sharp-edged speculation. People questioned who she was, what her intentions were, whether she had appeared out of nowhere to cash in on Richard's guilt. Some called her brave. Others called her opportunistic. Most didn't know her story and didn't care to. Then came the real blow, a statement from Richard's other children. We are saddened by recent attempts to manipulate our father's image and legacy. We do not know this woman. She is not family. Zoe read it twice. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a warning shot, a public drawing of lines. She hadn't asked for a seat at their table, but they had already slammed the door. She stared at her phone for a long time. Then she turned it off. That afternoon, Richard called. She let it ring. A few minutes later, a message came through. Let me handle it. My legal team can shut it down. Zoe didn't reply. Because this wasn't about image control. This wasn't about silencing rumors or managing scandal. This was about truth, and whether she would let someone else protect her from it or face it herself. Zoe didn't hide. She showed up to every planning meeting. She listened. She made decisions. She walked through that building like she had been born to lead it. Not because someone handed her power, but because her mother had raised her with enough courage to carry it. And when a reporter showed up outside the office, asking if she was the secret daughter, she looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm not a secret. I'm Evelyn Carter's daughter, and I'm exactly where she would have wanted me to be." That single quote lit up the internet. News outlets picked it up. Bloggers dissected it. It was clear she wasn't just stepping into the spotlight, she was owning it. But what Zoe didn't expect was what came next. The very next morning, a thick white envelope arrived, hand-delivered, but unsigned. Inside was a single note in elegant cursive. Mrs. Vivian Lawson would like to meet you, if you're willing. Zoe stared at the name for a long time. Vivian Lawson. Richard's mother, the woman who had made the decision that changed everything, who had forced him to choose money over love, image over truth, the woman who had erased Evelyn from their lives before Zoe had even taken her first breath. Zoe had never met her, but she'd felt the shadow of her choices every day of her life. This wasn't just a social visit, it was a reckoning, and Zoe wasn't afraid to face it. Vivian Lawson didn't rise when Zoe entered. She didn't have to. Power lived in her posture, poised, elegant, unmoved. She sat like a monarch in her private court, surrounded by generations of portraits and a silence that made statements louder than words. Zoe stepped into the sitting room slowly, eyes wide open, not intimidated, but fully aware. A fire crackled gently behind the glass. Richard stood quietly near the fireplace, gaze lowered. He didn't speak. Not yet. Vivian's lips curved into a cold smile. You're Evelyn's girl. I see she passed along her. Resolve. Zoe didn't answer, Vivian continued, eyes scanning her like a file. You're quite composed for someone raised so. Modestly, I suppose Evelyn did the best she could under her circumstances. Zoe took a seat opposite her, not to relax, but to anchor herself. For a moment, she let the silence breathe. Then, calmly, tell you while you hosted charity galas. My mother skipped meals so I could eat. She walked to work so I could take the bus to school. She gave up everything, comfort, rest, joy, and still came home with hope in her eyes. Vivian offered a thin nod. Strength can be admirable. But let's not confuse sacrifice with suitability. Your mother didn't belong in our world. Zoe leaned forward. She didn't want your world. She wanted love, a family, a chance. And you ripped that away. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, and I preserved my son's legacy. That's what mothers do. Zoe's voice didn't rise. It sharpened. Did you ever wonder what kind of man your son became after you ripped love out of his life? Vivian didn't answer. If you were really protecting him, why make sure no one with a heart could inherit your legacy? Vivian blinked once, then folded her hands again. Zoe reached into her bag and pulled out 2 items. A photo of Evelyn holding baby Zoe at the hospital, radiant, exhausted, proud, and a single page from Evelyn's clinic journal, written in neat cursive. One day, I want to build something for mothers like me, a place where dignity isn't a privilege, where no one feels invisible. Zoe placed them both on the glass table between them. You didn't just keep a man from being a father. You tried to erase a woman whose grace outlived your cruelty. And now, I carry every dream you tried to bury. Vivian's gaze flicked to the photo, but her words had vanished. For the first time, silence sat at her side not as power, but as consequence. Then Richard stepped forward, voice low and trembling. That's enough, Mother. Zoe stood, tall and unshaken. My mother belonged everywhere love was honored. That's what scared you, isn't it? She had power without wealth. She made you feel small without saying a word. Vivian didn't respond, but her stillness cracked. Zoe continued. Once you can't undo what you did to her, but you will never do it to me. She turned to Richard. So, you stayed silent when it mattered most. Are you going to do that again? He looked between the 2 women and said it aloud. Not anymore. Vivian's face turned. When you brought this girl into my home and expect me to pretend? Richard's jaw clenched. No, I expect you to listen for once in your life. You didn't just destroy what Evelyn and I had. You destroyed what we could have been as a family. But you don't get to keep doing that. Zoe pulled an invitation from her coat pocket and placed it beside the photo. The Evelyn Carter Foundation Gala. Her mother's name in gold. You're not welcome, Zoe said. But your son is, because this time he's choosing to build something better. And with that, she walked to the door. No rage, no tears, just truth wrapped in quiet strength. Richard paused, watching his mother, the woman who had controlled everything. She's right, you know, he said gently. She's more of a Lawson than I ever was. He followed his daughter out, leaving Vivian alone in her curated silence, with only truth echoing through the walls she built to keep love out. The gala night arrived under a calm sky. Snow dusted the pavement as a long line of black cars pulled up to the entrance of the Evelyn Carter Foundation. Inside the towering glass atrium, soft golden light bathed the room, reflecting off framed photos of Evelyn, none posed, all real. Zoe stood at the edge of it all, calm, centered. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to fulfill. There were whispers, of course, about her name, her background, her sudden inheritance of visibility, but no one dared question why she belonged. Not after the last few weeks, not after what she had claimed, truth, not approval. Richard stood nearby, not in front of her, not guiding. For the first time, he was present without taking up space. The foundation board waited. So did the crowd. Zoe walked up the stage steps, alone, and stood before the microphone. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't need a grand introduction. She just spoke. My name is Zoe Carter. My mother was Evelyn Carter, a nurse, a single mother, a woman whose name was never printed in headlines, until now. The room fell into silence, not from politeness, but reverence. This foundation isn't a tribute to wealth. It's not about rewriting the past. It's about revealing the part that was left out. The part where love, not money, built a life. The part where strength didn't come from status, but from sacrifice. She took a slow breath. She didn't live to see this night, but I carry her in every decision, every plan, every hope. What you see around you isn't about erasing what came before. It's about finishing what she started. Zoe's voice softened, but the words struck harder than any applause. My mother never had power or wealth, but she had purpose, she had love, and now she has a legacy. She stepped away from the podium, not waiting for praise. She had already done what she came to do. Zoe didn't claim a family name. She built a legacy. Now we ask you, should Zoe let Richard remain in her life, or is restoring her mother's dignity enough? Can love mend what silence once buried? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story spoke to you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes that truth always finds its voice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.